Hey, Low Code Approach listeners, this is Wendy Haddad. Before we jump into this week's episode, I wanted to let you know that we are starting to plan for the next season, and we want to make sure we hear from you on what is most important and relevant in terms of the topics that we'll be choosing. So if you could open a web browser and pop over to aka.ms/low code topic request, that's aka.ms/low code topic request, all one word. Fill out that brief survey on what topics and what subjects, what guests you might want to hear from. And who knows, maybe it'll make it into the next season of the podcast. Thanks so much and happy listening.
Hey everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Low Code Approach. I'm Sean Feeney, a Senior Product Marketing Manager on the Power Platform team, and I'm joined by...
I'm Wendy Haddad. I'm a Senior Cloud Solution Architect, Delivery Lead, and a former Microsoft customer, and I am joined by...
Kenrick Aguilar, Principal Program Manager, eagerly anticipating Sean introducing our next guest, whose Armenian translation into English is Alan Johnson. Sean, who is it?
It's Oleg Johnson. No, it's Oleg Ovanesyan. Oleg is Principal Program Manager Lead on the Dataverse team. How you doing today, Oleg?
Doing well. Just glad to be with you guys and happy to talk about Dataverse. What else to do this Friday morning?
We were having a very pre-podcast, interesting conversation about the origin of your name. So it was very fun to challenge Sean on that pronunciation there. Good job. Congratulations. You won, Sean.
I tried to trip you up, Sean, but it didn't work. You did a great job.
You're the best. Thank you, Ken.
Best friend there. So, Oleg, we're so glad to have you on the show today. I know that you are in the Dataverse space, and let's maybe start at the 50,000 foot view of what is the case for Dataverse? What differentiates it from other platforms in the market, especially when it comes to low code? What advantages or considerations does it provide?
So Dataverse, it's an interesting thing. So first off, Dataverse is not like a storage. It's not a database. It's not a place that you just put your data in, just live there. Dataverse is a low-code business application platform. So you build your apps on top of it. You use your platform to build apps on top of it. What it does do, it gives you an abstraction of many services that Microsoft produces and that can be used to build apps. And so instead of making you manage all these services yourself, instead of you being forced into using them with code, Dataverse provides that layer of abstraction. So you can build your apps, you can build your user experience, you can build your business rules, you can have your data stored in it, all while focusing on a business case as opposed to being forced to manage software. That's, I think, a short version of Dataverse. So many claim to have a low-code, but there is a low-code fragment, I would put it this way. Because you ask, well, what is the difference between Dataverse and others? So to me, Dataverse is it's a comprehensive thing. It's an end-to-end thing. It's an outcome-based platform. So it's not that, you can do this with low-code, but for the rest, you're on your own, or you have to boot on Visual Studio, or have some professional developer write code. It gives you end-to-end platform so you can build your app. That's what, to me, is Dataverse.
I think you've touched on it, but I've heard customers talk to us and say, it's nothing but a fancy SQL server.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't I just be using SQL? Would you maybe touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question, Ken, actually. I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about SQL first for a second, right? SQL is a RDBMS. It's a relational database management system. That's what it is. It just it's a container for your data. It's completely agnostic to why you have that data there. What do you need to do? It's not like a negative. That's what it's built for. It's a universal, ubiquitous data storage. It needs to load your data into it fast, process it fast, run queries fast, be efficient, have redundancy, all the nice things that we love about storages, right? And it has a relational aspect to it as well. But it doesn't know what you want to do with that data. It doesn't know how do you want to secure it from a business perspective. It doesn't know what the retention policy of it is. It doesn't know lots of things that the business app would know. So what Dataverse does, Dataverse uses SQL actually. SQL is one of the storages that Dataverse uses as a backend. But what Dataverse does, Dataverse gives you a abstraction platform on top of SQL that, for example, manages your role-based security and a row-based security. I'm not sure if my pronunciation gives you the difference, but there is a role, as in what is my role in an organization, and there is a data row in a table that can be stamped with me, with my name. So I will be only presented with the data I have access to, I have rights to, that is governed by Dataverse. This is like one small aspect of it. So you see, that's where the difference comes. Plus, we do not allow at Dataverse, we do not allow direct access to storage. So you always go through the API layer. So all the policies and security and all the business rules run when you do the insert, of data, when you do the updates and whatnot. So that is the quickest differentiator between Dataverse as a platform and just SQL Server or Cosmos or any other just data storage platforms.
I do want to call out one thing though, like you said, one of the sort of benefits of SQL or with any, relational database in that type of platform is sometimes the resiliency, replication, and so on. Dataverse does also have those things, right?
Yep.
So it's not in one single geo, it's expansive.
No. It's multi. Yeah, it's a Dataverse. That's what I say. It's everything that the storage platforms do plus. It's a storage plus. It can let you store files. It stores just data in a tabular form. It stores the images and the attachments and whatnot. Plus, it scales. It has the BCDR, so basically disaster recovery. So it has all these services as well, in addition to just storage. So nothing gets degraded, so to speak.
So, Oleg, you bring up all these great security and functionality features for Dataverse. Question I have is, like, as organizations want to move and bring in AI and they want to, scale enterprise-wide for the solutions that they're building on low code, can you talk a little bit about how the common data model allows them to build applications quicker without having to worry about issues with data types that they're using across their applications and making sure that that data can go further than just, one single table to an application, but can be used across multiple applications? And I might be leading you on this, but could you talk about how that benefits organizations?
Yeah, sure. Let's first play a little bit of linguistics here. When you say common data model, so the first question is okay, data model is fine. Common among what? What is it common among? It's a common among Microsoft, the business platform. This is common across all our set of business applications. So it has the schemas, the data types, and whatnot. So when you're building within, you're kind of using CDM without even knowing about it. You're using the common data model. You don't have to think about, oh my God, I'm using common data model. No, you're not. You just customer of Dataverse, you're building your app, you're extending the database schemas. For example, you create your custom table because you need to have some app that you just don't have that table in Dataverse. So what do? You create the table, but you use the same data types as with Dataverse. You can build relationships with existing tables. So, but without you explicitly knowing about it, you're using common data model. So that is the short kind of answer to that.
I know that we at Microsoft actually build some of our core services using Dataverse as a backend. Can you speak a little bit to that in terms of maybe some examples of services and some of the why we've made that architectural decision?
So we build, for example, what I do use every day, it's the Planner app. It's the Planner app that we use at Microsoft to plan our work. We just do that. And you it's so ubiquitous. You don't even think about what am I using. There is no specialized skill that you need to get trained. It's a very intuitive app. And the reason we chose it, it's basically why we built Dataverse in the first place. It's a business app platform. So when people who were in charge for building that thing got the requirements, they basically figured, okay, we have software, we build software to fit exactly that purpose. We need to build a business app. We need to have scenarios. It needs to have security model. It needs to govern permissions. It needs to have user experience. It needs to have certain business rules. For example, you cannot set a ship date before the code completes. It's something like that. So it needs to run all these rules. And ta-da, that's Dataverse. To build it from scratch, and I was a developer in my previous life, to build that from scratch, that would take you a lot of time and resource spent on testing and building. And most of what you will do if you build it from scratch, it's you would test something that we call like a core services. Does it run? Does it scale? What if I want to have it in another region? What if I want to have someone add to it? What if someone leaves an organization? So that is a lot of these things that Dataverse just gives you out of the box that you need to build. That's one of the examples. And there are many others that the customers use it for, obviously. But Microsoft is one of the largest customers of Dataverse, actually. So if I go run by regular reporting, I see that, Microsoft's using it a lot. And what people actually forget that Microsoft is one of the Fortune 500 companies. We are big. And when we roll something for our internal use and use it, that's the greatest testament to our software. So we use our own software.
We eat our own food, so to speak, right?
Oh, yeah. Every day.
So I've got an interesting question. I'm a customer and you say, okay, great, you should be using Dataverse. So I start using it, but now I look at it and I'm like, I really want to extend this to other systems. Maybe I want to hook into Dataverse's API. Does Dataverse also allow for those types of connections? How does that integration perhaps look like? Is it easy? Is it, so on? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yep, sure. It's a great way to speak to value of Dataverse. Dataverse is not like a locked-in system. It's not that you in Dataverse, that's it. You cannot talk to any external system. You just have to put all your data in a Dataverse and whatnot. Dataverse has, as you said, a robust API layer that can be used for integrating inside and out. So you can have a external system talk to Dataverse and vice versa. It's all buildable. Plus, you don't have to build that yourself on the low-code conversation, right? So there is actually the Power Automate, which is built-in services into Dataverse that you can use to build those integrations. It's a WYSIWYG. It's a point-and-click interface that you can use to connect to external systems. We have 1,000+ connectors, I think, out of the box that can talk to pretty much anything. So you can use that to speak to external systems. And this is when it comes to like a functional level integration. There is a data level integration, which is very dear to my heart, is when you have data that resides outside of Dataverse that you need to bring in or you need to link to. So you don't have to copy it over. You can leave it where it's at and just use it at Dataverse. So we also have a built-in functionality into Dataverse. We have embedded Power Platform data flows that will allow you to bring the data in to copy them into tables in Dataverse. Or we have, for example, we also shipped Fabric shortcuts. So if you have your data reside outside in Fabric, you can have a shortcut that will effectively let you use that data without moving it. So you're not creating another copy. You have data reside in Fabric. You just use the shortcuts for it. That's the kind of an answer to your question, Ken. So yes, you can. There are built-in functionality to facilitate that right in Dataverse. And it's not limited to just functional. It can be said the same about data as well.
Thank you.
So you're not locked in a Dataverse. It's very friendly to integrate with other systems.
Well, and I think to double click on that for a minute, you mentioned you've looked at the usage data. So, and you talked to customers. So what are you actually seeing real customers do? And you don't have to mention customer names, but just even examples. Are customers saying, I'm switching all in on Dataverse and migrating data and setting that up? Do you tend to see customers adopting more of a hybrid strategy with Dataverse for net new things? Are they advising low code to go with Dataverse, but pro code to go with another database solution like SQL? How are customers evaluating this option?
It's a great question, Wendy. Thank you. So there is a whole spectrum. You cannot say that one solution fits all. We've seen Dataverse, and sometimes you have a Dataverse tenant, and you see all these organizations within it. So it's like, God, it takes you a while to click through all of them to see how many orgs are set up within Dataverse. It's amazing. It depends on the size of the company. And if you're already been an established company and you have software that you run your business on, and then you purchase Dataverse, you start to onboard it. You can start with departmental software. It's again, touching back to what Ken had asked for. It integrates well with the rest of your company. So you can start with the department. Some companies have their whole business run on Dataverse. It's the entire life is on Dataverse. They just get Dynamics. Actually, I shouldn't say Dataverse because you cannot, quote unquote, get just Dataverse. You get Power Platform, get Dynamics, you get our local platform. If they have apps, they migrate to it. Others use it as a platform to build apps that they use in their daily business. And that is also the very useful case. And with the two ends of the spectrum, one is being you have the entire Dynamics products. You have a Dynamics product suite that the Dataverse underpins. This is one side. Another side is that you use Power Platform as a platform to build apps. In that spectrum, you have all sorts of variations on how it's integrated, what is it integrated with. You have daily Excel file loads and you have real-time SAP integrations. You have all of it. So that's kind of, at this point in this life, it has all the aspects to it.
Hey, Oleg, so you mentioned, organizations can build applications using Dataverse. And as we talk about that enterprise, wide hyperscale, like we meet all these needs with Dataverse. How do we break that misconception that Dataverse is only used for building those proof of concepts applications before moving to a quote unquote real data platform like SQL or, going to, another data store of some sort? Why should they not do that and just reside on Dataverse? Also, I work in marketing, so do my job for me. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, great. So I'll put the best marketing face I think possible. So Dataverse, it's not about proof of concept. This is like a logical disconnect right there. If you use something to build a proof of concept and then you move it to some other platform, then you kind of devalued your proof of concept. There is no concept that you prove. You prove that something works on Dataverse and then you move it somewhere else, you still need to prove it again. So that is the first kind of, I would ask the question, why would you do that in the first place if you already built it on Dataverse? Second, why do it? Dataverse doesn't have any data size limit that says, oh, you cannot store this much data, you can only store this much data. It's not accurate. You can store as much data as you want. Dataverse is robust from a security and application lifecycle perspective. So if you have compliance requirements or you have regular application lifecycle is set up in your organization, you can also use Dataverse. You don't have to migrate it somewhere else. And I think the question there is that if you answer the question that Dataverse is not a data storage, it's a business application platform, then you don't go, oh, I built the proof of concept on Dataverse, then I will go to SQL. Why? You just need to replicate role-based security on just database. It will take you a while, and you're probably not going to get it right.
You just gave Ken his opening for all of the governance and security questions.
Of course. I'm coming in.
There you go. The door is open,
Yep.
Ken.
As all my fans know, I love governance and security. So I have a great question. Auditing. I think one of the greatest things that I've seen for myself is the level of auditing that the platform offers. Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about that in terms of what exactly can they audit and, how and perhaps why from a compliance standpoint, if you will?
So I'll go to the very basic, right? So when you create a table, for example, in Dataverse, there is a checkbox that you have to include an audit. So once you click that checkbox, and the rest is included in it by default, the thing that we ship out of the box. So you click that box, it will create audit log for your actions. So if you have a compliance reason, for example, you need to know who did what, when, and where. You have that ability with Dataverse. You will have that in. I don't remember what is the retention policy on that audit log. But from an audit perspective, you have your ability to audit all the actions on the data. That's kind of the short end of it.
Read, write.
Yeah, the read, write, all the operations.
Yes.
That's the whole thing. So, and again, going back to that proof of concept, if you want to do just that on just relational database, yes, you can have SQL logs and whatnot, but it's not going to be the same as you have in Dataverse.
And you can even get down to not just, say, the table, but individual columns or individual rows and so on.
Yep.
Right.
And you can also secure them. That's they kind of go hand in hand, right? So you can secure it based on your roles. You can actually get as granular as Oleg has access to certain roles on the table X. And that's going to be only available for me and not for you.
What about customers who are concerned about their data and the residency in terms of maybe where it lies, or even, hey, is my data encrypted within Dataverse? Can they use their own keys, for example, to encrypt their own data?
Yeah, the CMK, I think we shipped customer managed keys. So you can use your own key to encrypt your own data. And data residency is also something that we take close to our heart, and with the client's rules and all the recent regulations and whatnot. So that is all part of the Dataverse as a platform. And the CMK, yes, you can have your own keys, and we can have this whole entire podcast on just that. I'll help facilitate that if needed on how to actually do that.
I personally would love that, but I will yield the floor to Wendy.
Well, Power Platform started as more of this personal use case. It was part of Office 365. And so many of our customers have honestly the muscle memory and think about finances. They think about licenses only. They're not necessarily thinking about the security that Dataverse offers. And so they build their apps on SharePoint lists as the backend, for example. Can you speak to that first of all? But then I'd also like you to play a little bit of devil's advocate, if I may, and say, is there even a place for SharePoint lists as the back end of your data source, or should everything be built on Dataverse or another more pro code solution?
That is a great question. We actually shipped, I think fairly recently, SharePoint to table feature. So if you have your data in SharePoint, you can bring it to Dataverse. You can continue to have it linked. You can have a virtual table. I think we have a virtual table connector for SharePoint. So again, you have two options for when it comes to data. You can grab data from SharePoint list. You can continue to live in SharePoint. You can have your own life in SharePoint, but then if you have a data in a SharePoint list that you need in Dataverse, you can build that. You can have that connection. If you want to leave it at SharePoint, then you can have a virtual table that will present itself as a table in Dataverse, but will maintain that link to SharePoint list. So net of this story is, if you use to SharePoint and you have your life set up in SharePoint, continue to live there. Dataverse will have a robust application built using that SharePoint data as one of the data sources.
So I do think you jumped to a concept we haven't explained yet. So can you talk about what virtual tables are specifically?
Virtual table, think of it this way. It looks like a table, it walks like a table, it quacks like a table in Dataverse, but the data lives elsewhere. So for example, we have a virtual table from SQL. Data continues to live in SQL. It's managed in SQL, but it presents in Dataverse. The same, and we have like an SDK that you can build if you have some esoteric system, or you can build your own connector for that, and then you'll have it, and you have freedom of choice. You can have it as a read-only connector, you can have a read-write connector, it's up to you. But the concept of a virtual table is that you don't copy the data that resides in that table to Dataverse.
So say you use a virtual table from that source, SharePoint, for example, whose permissions holds true, right? Are we just carrying over the permissions of SharePoint, and then that would go into our usage in the applications? Yep. Okay, so just to confirm.
Yeah, we honor, we don't have like God's permissions to your data, so that's going to be.
Got it. And so how do you make that decision of what to use when between SharePoint? Like you mentioned, why use a different data platform before, as we talk about enterprise apps or like proof of concept or whatever. And then are you just inheriting thresholds from whatever system like SharePoint, like list thresholds? Like, why wouldn't you just start in Dataverse? I think it repeats on the conversation that we had earlier.
Yeah, there is no cut and dry solution to it. It just depends on where you are in the life cycle in your organization. It just depends really there. So if you've been an Office user or SharePoint user for a while, and then you got Dataverse, your natural move will be to gradually transition to Dataverse, to gradually transition to Power Apps, gradually transition to apps. But at the same time, each of these things, I'm a big fan of ecosystems. I don't go into, you should only use this system or you should only use that system. So the power of Microsoft ecosystem is that our software plays well together, and we are open systems, so you can play with other software as well, manufactured by others. So you have your purpose built. Sometimes your app or your daily life is so inherently tied to SharePoint that you don't want to leave that. And it has its life. It has its purpose. The Dataverse, the beauty of Dataverse is that it can integrate with it, so you don't have to make that decision. At the same time, when it comes to maturing as a business application, then you're probably going to gravitate towards Power Platform. You're going to gravitate toward Dataverse because that's where you build your apps on.
It's like that famous graphic that we have where it's the infant crawling, and that's maybe the beginning of your journey, and then the adults are using Dataverse at the end of the journey. So I see where you're going with that.
But you don't have to throw away something that you've already used, right? So if that's what you live, if that's what you used to, or what gives you the best answer, so to speak, because all our tools, SharePoint is great for what it does.
Yeah, and I would add, and then I want to ask one final question before we wrap. I think another part of the Which Tool When is really, I mean, they're both wonderful tools. And I know we are focusing on Dataverse, but obviously we're not casting shade on SharePoint. But it really comes down to the security as well of your data, the protections you need, the way you need to lock it down. It is more robust on that life cycle, as you said, the Dataverse side, because it's intended for that. And so in terms of that business criticality, and I think there's a link we can drop, Sean, I'll get that to you in the show notes of some of those comparisons. There's a really good article that PowerCat put out that we could reference. Oleg, we're coming to the end of our episode, but I want to ask one final question because we'd remiss to not hit our co-pilot ring the bell for asking. So what's happening with AI in the Dataverse space right now?
A lot is happening. I'm glad you asked. We are AI. We are Copilot everywhere. So what we do with Copilots, actually enhancing the life of a Dataverse user or the Power Apps user with the power of Copilots and AI. Because for example, I will just plug the feature that I'm really proud of, which is in preview. We have AI-assisted mapping for moving data with Power Platform data flows. Then we have Copilot that helps you build tables coming from external sources into Excel. Then we have all sorts of Copilots helping you build apps in Dataverse. So you actually have this conversational Copilot that helps you start to build your app. So there is a lots of app enhancements and experience enhancements with AI. And a point that I want to actually make across is that Dataverse is business application data platform and AI platform as well. It naturally facilitates building and using Copilots and using AI and using all these capabilities in Dataverse. So that is something that we really big on, and it will keep on coming. Stay tuned. Just go to Microsoft Power Platform Conference. This is Power Platform Conference in September. There's going to be lots of great announcements about Copilots and AI. Then it will be Ignite. So every event, we ship new features. And these new features mostly are Copilot and AI. So just stay tuned for that.
Awesome. Oleg, just like, it's really funny. Usually we, write a list of questions that kind of give us an understanding of the flavor of the show and what we're going to chat with our guest about. And oh my, did we throw that out right after we introduced you? So I would love to have you back on the show. So maybe we can talk a little bit about why we originally wanted to bring you on, which is still Dataverse related. But look, Oleg, it was absolutely fantastic talking to you. You're a wealth of information, and we have to get you back on the show. This has been absolutely fantastic. And we really look forward to chatting with you many more times.
I see hour-long episodes coming in our future here, Sean.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Oleg. We'll see you soon.